The shot glass spun twice before it hit her table. Whiskey
Chug it, coward.
exploded across her cheese fries like liquid contempt. Four Marine Raiders erupted in laughter from the center of the bar. "Chug it, coward!" The biggest one bellowed, his voice slicing through every conversation. "Or are you too busy cramming for midterms, little girl?" She didn't flinch, didn't speak, just sat there in her oversized UCLA hoodie, baby face, blank ponytail, messy, looking every bit the lost college student they assumed she was. They had no idea they were being evaluated. They had no idea who she was. But in 72 hours, they would beg her for forgiveness. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay until the very end, because the most dangerous person in any room is the one who lets you keep talking. The glass had barely stopped spinning when Marcus "Tank" Holloway pushed back from his table, arms spread wide like he owned the oxygen in the room. "Did you see that?" he called to his crew. "Perfect shot. Didn't even have to aim." Danny Vega slapped the table, laughing so hard his beer sloshed over the rim. 10 points for distance, bro. Solid technique." She didn't even move. Jesse Tate leaned back, eyes fixed on the corner booth. "What's wrong with her?" Ryan Chen said nothing. He watched the girl reach for a napkin. Methodical, unhurried like this happened to her every day. Something about that calm made his stomach tighten. Tank grabbed a fresh beer from the table and raised it toward the corner. "Hey, sweetheart, you gonna drink that or just let it soak your homework?" The girl dabbed at the spill. Her face showed nothing. "Maybe she's deaf," Vega offered. "Maybe she's dumb." Tank grinned. "Both probably. Lost little college girl wandered into the wrong bar." The Iron Anchor wasn't a college bar. Everyone knew that. Tucked behind a strip mall 2 miles from Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, it catered exclusively to operators, retired SEALs, and the occasional intelligence contractor who didn't want to be recognized. The walls were covered in unit patches and faded photographs. The jukebox hadn't worked since 2019. The floor had absorbed so much spilled beer over the decades that it felt sticky, even when it was clean. No one came here by accident. But Tank Holloway wasn't thinking about that. He was thinking about the evaluation tomorrow morning, about how his team had been selected for JSOTF-7 integration assessment, about how his divorce papers had arrived that morning and his ex-wife was already poisoning his daughter against him. He was thinking about how good it felt to make someone else feel small. "Vega." Tank jerked his chin toward the corner. "Go help the little girl find her way back to campus." Vega stood, straightening his shirt with exaggerated care. "On it, Sergeant." He grabbed a fresh whiskey from the bar. Ray Delgado poured it without expression, eyes flat, and walked toward the corner booth with the swagger of a man who'd never been told no. The girl didn't look up as he approached. "Hey there." Vega slid into the booth across from her without asking. "Rough night, huh? Let me make it up to you." She continued, wiping the table. Systematic. Patient. "I'm Danny." "What's your name?" "Nothing." "Okay, silent type. I can work with that." He set the whiskey glass down in front of her. "Peace offering. Best stuff they've got." She glanced at the glass, then back to her napkin. "Not a drinker." Vega leaned closer. "Smart. Gotta keep that GPA upright. What are you studying?" "Let me guess. Nursing. You've got that whole caring vibe." Ray Delgado behind the bar tightened his grip on the rag in his hand. 63 years old. Retired Master Chief. 3 combat deployments. He knew exactly who was sitting in that corner booth, and he knew exactly what was about to happen to these 4 idiots. But it wasn't his place to intervene. Not yet. "Come on," Vega pressed. "One word. Just tell me your name. It's not that hard." The girl set down her napkin. For the first time, she looked directly at him. Her eyes were brown, warm, almost soft, but something behind them made Vega's smile falter. "I'm fine," she said. Her voice was quiet, controlled, each word placed with precision. "Thank you." "She speaks." Vega turned to shout back at the table. "Guys, she speaks." Tank raised his beer in mock celebration. "A miracle. What did she say?" "She's fine." Vega turned back, grinning. "See, We're making progress. Now about that drink. I said I'm fine. The girl picked up her ginger ale, not beer, not wine. Ginger ale, and took a small sip. You can go back to your friends now. Something flickered across Vega's face. Irritation. The unfamiliar sting of being dismissed. Whoa, okay. He held up his hands. Just trying to be friendly. No need to be a Danny. Tank's voice cut across the bar. Stop flirting and get back here. She's obviously not interested in what you're offering. Laughter from the table. Vega's jaw tightened. Yeah, he said, standing. Yeah, you're right. She's not worth it anyway. He grabbed the whiskey glass, the one he'd placed in front of her as a peace offering, and as he turned to leave, his elbow caught the edge. The glass tipped. Whiskey poured across the table, soaking her fries, pooling against her phone, dripping onto the hem of her hoodie. Oops. Vega's face was flat. No apology, no surprise. Clumsy me. The girl stared at the spreading stain. Tank howled from across the room. Vega with the double kill. Somebody get this man a medal. Sorry about that. Vega wasn't sorry at all. His eyes were hard, waiting for a reaction, waiting for tears or anger or anything he could use. Guess you should have taken the drink when I offered. The girl reached for another napkin. You know what? Vega leaned down, his face inches from hers. I don't know what your problem is, but you're in the wrong bar, sweetheart. This place is for warriors, not whatever you are. Ray Delgado set down his rag. But before he could move, the girl stood. She didn't slam her chair back, didn't throw anything, didn't raise her voice. She simply rose, gathered her phone, picked up her ginger ale, and stepped around Vega like he was a piece of furniture she needed to navigate. Where are you going? Vega called after her. She didn't answer. Hey, I'm talking to you. She walked to the far side of the bar where an empty two-top sat against the wall. She settled into the new seat back to the corner facing the room this time, took a sip of her ginger ale, returned her attention to the muted television above the bar. Aircraft carriers. F-18s catching wire. The mechanical rhythm of deck operations. Vega stood in the middle of the floor, arms hanging at his sides, feeling like an idiot without understanding why. Tank waved him back. Forget it, man. She's not worth your time. But as Vega walked back to the table, the girl said something. Quiet, almost to herself. You should practice your spills. That one was too obvious. The laughter died. Vega stopped mid-step. What? She didn't repeat it. At the table, Tank leaned forward. What did she just say? Something about... Vega's brow furrowed. Something about being obvious. Ryan Chen's stomach dropped. He'd been watching her the entire time, watching how she moved, how she breathed, how her eyes tracked the room even when she seemed to be staring at nothing. She said we made it obvious, Chen said quietly. The spill. She knew it was deliberate. Tank scoffed. So what? Who cares what some college girl thinks? But something had shifted in the room, the energy, the air itself. The girl sat alone at her new table, not looking at them, not acknowledging their existence. And somehow that was worse than any confrontation, because she'd dismissed them, not with anger, not with tears, with nothing. Like they weren't worth the effort of a response. Tank drained his beer and slammed the glass down. Whatever. She's probably just some contractor's kid with daddy issues. Let's focus on tomorrow. What's tomorrow again? Tate asked. Integration evaluation. Tank's jaw tightened. Some SEAL commander is running assessment for JSOTF-7. Supposed to decide if we're good enough to work with the special operations community. Chen glanced at the corner. You know who the evaluator is? Some lieutenant named Mercer. Tank shrugged. Never heard of them. Probably some desk jockey who's never seen real combat. You know how these evaluations go, all politics, no substance. Mercer. Vega rolled the name around. That a man or a woman? Does it matter? Tank leaned back. Either way, we'll impress them. We're Marine Raiders. We've been doing this longer than some junior grade lieutenant has been alive. At the bar, Ray Delgado turned away to hide his expression. Junior grade lieutenant. If only they knew. The girl, the one they'd spent the last hour humiliating, pulled out her phone and typed a quick message. Ray watched from the corner of his eye as the screen lit up with a response almost immediately. Admiral Keller. Assessment proceeding as planned. She typed back initial observations complete. Significant attitude problems. Recommend extended evaluation period. Admiral Keller. Understood. Your call, Commander. Trust your judgment. She pocketed the phone and returned her attention to the television. The Marines didn't notice. They didn't notice anything. Not the small scar on the side of her neck shrapnel from an IED in Raqqa that had killed 2 of her teammates and left her buried under rubble for 3 hours. Not the way she held her ginger ale left hand freeing her dominant right. Not the faint outline of muscle beneath her oversized hoodie, the kind that came from years of combat conditioning, not college gym memberships. Not the way her eyes moved, cataloging, calculating, filing away every detail. They saw what they wanted to see, a weak little girl who didn't belong. And that was exactly what she wanted them to see. Cassidy Ghost Mercer took another sip of her ginger ale and let the television wash over her without really watching it. In her mind, she was running through files she'd memorized that afternoon. Sergeant Marcus Holloway, 29, Marine Raider, 2 deployments, high marks in tactical leadership, flagged 3 times for insubordination, custody battle with ex-wife, 8-year-old daughter he barely saw, compensated for emotional pain through aggression and dominance. Corporal Daniel Vega, 27, communications specialist, technically brilliant, emotionally immature, deep-seated insecurity masked by bravado, needed external validation to feel competent, would fold under sustained pressure. Corporal Jesse Tate, 26, combat medic, quiet, follower, no disciplinary issues, no commendations either, disappeared into the background of every formation, would do whatever the group decided for better or worse. Lance Corporal Ryan Chen, 31, former Force Recon, downgraded after shoulder injury. Father was career military Iraq 2003. High situational awareness, low tolerance for incompetence. The only one who'd been watching her with something other than contempt. He was the one to watch. He was the one who might actually learn something. But the others, Cassidy had seen 100 men like them. 1,000. Men who measured strength by volume, who confused cruelty with confidence, who thought leadership meant being the loudest voice in any room. Men who would get people killed if no one corrected them. Men like the one who'd gotten Marcus Webb killed. She pushed the thought down. Not here. Not now. The memories would come later in the quiet hours before dawn when she couldn't outrun them anymore. Marcus's face, his laugh, the way he'd believed in her when no one else had, the way he'd died because she'd been too afraid to speak up, too afraid of being dismissed, too afraid of being called sweetheart one more time. Never again. She'd made that promise standing over his grave 3 years ago, rain streaming down her face, his trident pin clutched so tightly in her fist that it cut her palm. Never again. If she saw potential in someone, real potential, she would fight for it. She would push them until they broke or transformed. She would not let another Marcus Webb die because she was afraid of being wrong. And these 4 Marines, beneath the arrogance and the cruelty and the desperate need to prove themselves, there might be something worth saving, or there might not. That's what the next 72 hours would determine. Hey, Tank's voice cut across the bar. College girl, you want these back? She looked up. He was holding her basket of fries, the ones that had been soaking in whiskey for the last 20 minutes. He took one, made a show of eating it, then grimaced. Never mind, they're soggy. He dumped the basket onto the floor. Oops, second mess tonight. You're not having a good evening, are you? His team laughed. Cassidy didn't react. Come on. Tank spread his arms. Nothing. You're just going to sit there. Don't you have any self-respect? She met his eyes, held them. For a long moment, the bar was silent. Then she spoke. Sergeant Holloway. Tank's face went slack. How do you know my... Your evaluation begins at 0600 tomorrow. Her voice was calm, measured. I suggest you get some sleep. She stood, left a 20 on the table for Ray, and walked toward the door. Tank scrambled to his feet. Wait, who the hell are you? She paused at the door, didn't turn around. You'll find out tomorrow. The door closed behind her. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Vega laughed high and nervous. What the hell was that? How did she know your name? Tank's face was pale. I don't know. Chen stared at the door. She knew about the evaluation. She knew it starts at 0600. So that's not classified. Anyone could know that. She knew your name, Holloway. Your exact name. And she looked at you like what? Chen shook his head. Like she'd already decided something. Tate shifted uncomfortably. Guys, do you think what if she's nobody? Tank's voice was hard, but something underneath it had cracked. Just some contractor kid who has access to personnel files. It doesn't mean anything. Then why did she tell you to get some sleep? Tank had no answer for that. At the bar, Ray Delgado wiped down the counter with the ghost of a smile on his face. Tomorrow was going to be very interesting. Outside, Cassidy walked to her truck, a battered Ford pickup that looked like it belonged to a construction worker, not a decorated special operations officer. She climbed in, sat in the darkness for a moment, and pulled out Marcus Webb's trident pin. The gold was worn to brass in places, scratched from years of service. He'd given it to her the day she'd earned her own right, after she'd completed the most brutal assessment course in military history at the age of 19. You're going to be better than me, he'd said. I can see it. Just promise me one thing. Anything. When you find people worth the investment, people who could be great if someone just believed in them, don't give up on them. Even when they give you every reason to. Even when they make it hard. She'd promised. And now sitting in a dark parking lot outside a bar where 4 men had spent an hour trying to break her, she wondered if Marcus would see potential in them. Would he see past the cruelty to something worth saving? Or would he tell her to cut her losses and find better candidates? She didn't know, but she had 72 hours to find out. She started the truck and pulled out of the lot. Behind her, the Iron Anchor's neon sign flickered in the rearview mirror. Inside, Tank Holloway sat frozen, replaying the moment over and over. The way she'd looked at him. The way she'd said his name. The way she'd walked out without anger or fear or anything he could understand. She's nobody, he said again. But he didn't believe it. And deep down in the part of himself, he never let anyone see Sergeant Marcus Tank Holloway was afraid. Not of the evaluation, not of the assessment, of the girl. Because something in her eyes had told him that she saw right through him. And what she saw wasn't impressive. It wasn't strong. It wasn't worthy. What she saw was exactly who he really was, and tomorrow he had a terrible feeling she was going to show it to the world. He finished his beer in silence. The bar emptied around him, and somewhere across the base, Cassidy Mercer lay in her quarters, staring at the ceiling, running scenarios through her mind. 4 Marines, 72 hours. One chance to become something better, or one chance to prove they never deserved the uniform. Tomorrow the evaluation would begin, and none of them were ready for what she had planned. Tank didn't sleep that night. He lay in his rack, staring at the ceiling, replaying her voice in his head. Sergeant Holloway, your evaluation begins at 0600 tomorrow. How had she known? Who was she? Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. That calm, that absolute, unshakable calm. At 0430, he gave up trying. Showered, dressed, checked his uniform 3 times. Vega found him in the common area, coffee untouched, knee bouncing. You look like hell, Vega said. Didn't sleep. Still thinking about the college girl. Tank's jaw tightened. She knew my name, Danny. She knew about the evaluation. Something's not right. Coincidence. Vega poured himself coffee. She probably heard us talking. Sound carries in that bar. We never said my name. Not once. Vega paused, cup halfway to his lips. You sure be positive. Chen walked in, already dressed, face unreadable. You two ready? Born ready, Vega said, but his voice lacked its usual bravado. Tate followed a minute later, quiet as always. He looked at Tank, looked away. Nobody mentioned the bar. Nobody needed to. They rode to the training center in silence. The Joint Special Operations compound sprawled across the north end of the base, a maze of warehouses and shoot houses and obstacle courses that had broken better men than them. Tank had heard the stories. Candidates who'd quit after the first day, operators who'd washed out crying. This was where reputations came to die, or where legends were born. He wasn't sure which category they'd fall into. The briefing room was already packed when they arrived. 40 candidates total drawn from every branch: Rangers, Green Berets, PJs, Marine Raiders, all of them waiting to see if they had what it took to join JSOTF-7. Tank scanned the room looking for her. She wasn't there. He exhaled. Maybe he'd imagined it. Maybe the girl at the bar was just some random civilian who'd gotten lucky with a guess. Maybe. The door at the front of the room opened. An admiral's aide stepped through Ramrod's straight voice cutting through the chatter. "Attention on deck, evaluation commander arriving." Everyone snapped to their feet, and then she walked in. Tank's heart stopped. Same face, same ponytail, same small frame that couldn't have been more than 5'4", 115 pounds soaking wet. But everything else was different. She wore navy digital camouflage pressed and perfect. On her chest above her name tape sat a gold trident, the SEAL insignia, earned not given. She moved to the front of the room with the kind of economy that came from years of combat operations. No wasted motion, no nervous energy, pure efficiency. "Take your seats," she said. Her voice was quiet. They sat anyway. "I am Lieutenant Junior Grade Cassidy Mercer, SEAL Team 6. I will be your evaluation commander for the next 72 hours. Tank couldn't breathe. Vega made a sound beside him, something between a gasp and a whimper. She let the silence stretch, let them look at her, let them see the trident and try to reconcile it with the girl they'd humiliated 12 hours ago. "Some of you may be wondering about my qualifications." Her eyes swept the room. "I completed BUDS at 19. Youngest female to earn the trident in SEAL history. 3 combat deployments: Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen. 1 Silver Star, 1 Bronze Star, with Valor 2 Purple Hearts." She paused. "Any questions so far?" Nobody moved. "Good." She picked up a clipboard. "Let me be clear about what happens next. This evaluation is not about how fast you can run or how much you can lift. I already know your physical capabilities. I've read your files. What I don't know is how you think, how you lead, how you treat people when you believe no one is watching." Tank felt the blood drain from his face. "The evaluations have already begun." She looked directly at him, held his gaze for exactly 2 seconds, then moved on. "For some of you, they began last night." The room went cold. Vega's leg started bouncing under the table. Chen sat perfectly still, but his hands were clenched into fists. Tate looked like he might throw up. "You will be divided into teams of 4, Mercer continued. "Each team will rotate through 12 stations over the next 3 days. Every decision you make will be logged. Every word you speak will be recorded. Every interaction you have with instructors, with each other, with support staff will factor into your final assessment." She set down the clipboard. "This is not a competition against each other. This is a competition against yourselves, against the worst versions of who you've been. I'm looking for operators who can adapt, who can learn, who can admit when they're wrong and do better." Her eyes found Tank again. "I'm not looking for the loudest voice in the room. I'm looking for the voice that matters." Tank wanted to disappear, wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. But he couldn't move, could barely think. "Team 3. Mercer called out. "Sergeant Holloway, Corporal Vega, Corporal Tate, Lance Corporal Chen. You're with me for the first rotation. Station 6. Report in 5 minutes." She walked out without waiting for a response. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Vega leaned over, voice barely audible. "We're dead. We're absolutely dead." "Shut up," Tank managed. "She's going to destroy us. You understand that, right? She's going to—" "I said shut up." Chen stood. "Let's go. We're already on thin ice. Don't make it worse by being late." They walked to Station 6 like men walking to their execution. The drill was simple enough on paper. Personnel prioritization. 3 hostiles, 2 civilians, 1 wounded ally. 5-minute window. Every command decision recorded. Tank had run this scenario 100 times. He could do it in his sleep. But Mercer was watching, and everything he'd ever known about leadership evaporated the moment the timer started. "Contact left," Vega shouted. "I see them," Tank called back. "Tate, check the wounded." "Which wounded?" Tate's voice cracked. "There's 2 down. The ally. They're both wearing civilian clothes, I can't tell which. The one on the right," Chen cut in. "Look at his boots. Military issue." Tank hesitated. Was Chen right? The boots looked civilian to him, but Chen was always right about these things. Chen never missed details. "Confirmed," Tank said. "Tate right side. Vega cover the hostiles. Wrong." Mercer's voice cut through like a blade. The timer stopped. She stepped forward, clipboard in hand. The wounded ally was on the left. The man on the right was a hostile in civilian disguise. You just left your teammate to bleed out while providing medical care to someone who would have slit Tate's throat the moment he got close. Tank's stomach dropped. "How?" Vega started. "The boots were a plant, a test to see if you'd rely on assumptions instead of proper verification." Mercer made a note. "Corporal Chen, your instincts were good. Your confidence was premature. Verify before you call out intel that could get your team killed." Chen nodded once, face tight. "Sergeant Holloway," she turned to Tank. "Your hesitation cost you 3 seconds. In a real scenario, that's 3 seconds of bleeding, 3 seconds of vulnerability, 3 seconds where the hostile with the knife could have moved." "Yes, ma'am." "Why did you hesitate?" Tank's mouth went dry. I wasn't sure." "About what?" "About whether to trust Chen's call." "And why weren't you sure?" The question hung in the air. Tank knew the answer, knew it in his bones. He wasn't sure because he'd been rattled, because she was watching, because every time he looked at her he saw the girl at the bar, saw the whiskey soaking her fries, saw himself laughing. "I was distracted," he admitted. "By what?" He couldn't say it, couldn't admit it in front of 40 candidates. Mercer waited. "By personal matters, ma'am." "Personal matters don't exist in combat, Sergeant. When you're in the field, the only thing that exists is the mission and the people beside you. Everything else is noise. Learn to filter it or learn to fail." She turned to the rest of the room. "Station 6 resets in 10 minutes. Team 3, you'll run it again. This time verify before you engage." Questions. Silence. "Good." She walked away. Vega let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped for hours. "That was—" "Don't," Tank said. "She knows. She absolutely knows what we did. She's going to—" I said don't. But Tank knew Vega was right. Mercer wasn't just evaluating them. She was dissecting them. Every weakness, every flaw, every ugly truth they'd spent years hiding. And she was doing it without raising her voice, without breaking a sweat, without ever mentioning the bar directly. The second run went better. Tank verified. Chen double-checked. Tate found the right target. Vega kept his communications clear. They passed. Barely. Mercer made a note but said nothing. They rotated through 3 more stations that morning. Radio calibration under jamming. Rapid gear reassembly. Simulated civilian interaction. Each one exposed different weaknesses. Vega panicked when the radio frequencies shifted unexpectedly, defaulting to shouting instead of troubleshooting. Tate froze during the civilian scenario, unable to decide whether the woman screaming at him was a threat or a victim. Chen's shoulder injury flared during the gear assembly, costing them precious seconds. And Tank kept looking at Mercer, kept waiting for her to say something, to call him out, to finally acknowledge what had happened the night before. She never did. And that was worse. At 11:30, she called a break. The candidates scattered toward the mess hall, grateful for respite. Tank didn't move. "Sergeant Holloway," her voice came from behind him. A word. His team looked back, faces pale. "Go," Tank said. "I'll catch up." They went. Tank turned to face her. She stood with her arms crossed, clipboard tucked under one elbow. Up close, she looked even younger than she had at the bar. 24 maybe, 25 at most. But her eyes were ancient. "You wanted to talk, ma'am?" "No." She studied him. "You wanted to talk. You've been staring at me all morning waiting for me to bring up last night, so let's address it." Tank's throat tightened. "I know what you did," Mercer continued. "I know what you said. I know what you think of women in special operations. I know what you think of me. Ma'am, I'm not finished." Her voice didn't rise, didn't need to. "You threw a drink at me. Your team member deliberately spilled whiskey on my table. You called me college girl and sweetheart and suggested I didn't belong." Tank couldn't meet her eyes. "And you know what?" She stepped closer. "You were right." He looked up confused. "I didn't belong in that bar. Not because I'm a woman, not because I'm young, because I was working, I was assessing. And you gave me everything I needed to know about your character in under an hour. Ma'am, if I could explain." "Explain what?" "That you're going through a divorce, that your daughter's custody hearing is next month, that you're terrified, you're losing everything that matters, so you take it out on strangers who can't fight back." Tank's blood ran cold. "How do you know about—" "I read your file, Sergeant. All of it. Including the parts you probably wish didn't exist." She tilted her head. "Did you think your personal struggles would stay private? Did you think command wouldn't know about the drinking, the anger issues, the 3 separate complaints from female service members that got quietly buried because your unit commander liked your combat scores?" He couldn't speak. "I know exactly who you are, Marcus Holloway. I've known since before I walked into that bar. The question is, do you—" The use of his first name hit like a punch. He swallowed. "I don't know what you want me to say. I don't want you to say anything." She stepped back. "I want you to think about who you've been, about who you want to be, about whether the man who threw whiskey at a stranger is the same man who wants to raise a daughter." Tank felt something crack inside his chest. "You have 65 hours left in this evaluation," Mercer said. "That's 65 hours to show me something different, something better. If you can't—" She shrugged. "Then you'll go home and your daughter will grow up with a father who peaked in his 20s and spent the rest of his life wondering what went wrong." She turned to leave. "Ma'am." Tank's voice came out rough, broken. She paused. "Why are you giving me a chance? After what I did?" For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then quietly, "Because someone gave me a chance once, when I didn't deserve it, when I'd made mistakes that cost more than spilled whiskey." Her jaw tightened. "And because I see something in you that might be worth saving, don't make me regret it." She walked away. Tank stood alone in the empty training bay. For the first time in years, he didn't know who he was. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure he wanted to find out. But somewhere buried deep beneath the anger and the fear and the desperate need to prove himself, something shifted. Something cracked. And in that crack, light began to seep through. The afternoon sessions were brutal. Mercer ran them through stress inoculation scenarios, sleep deprivation simulation, decision-making under sensory overload. Tank failed the first test, passed the second, failed the third. Each time Mercer was there, watching, noting, never reacting. At 1800, she pulled Chen aside. Tank watched from across the bay, unable to hear the conversation. But he saw Chen's face change, saw the older man's shoulders drop, saw him nod once, twice. When Chen walked back, his expression was different. "What did she say?" Vega asked. Chen looked at Tank. "She asked me why I didn't stop us last night." Tank's stomach clenched. "What did you tell her?" "The truth." Chen's voice was flat. "That I was afraid of looking weak. That I didn't want to be the guy who defended the little girl." He shook his head. "She said that fear will get someone killed someday. Said I need to decide what kind of operator I want to be." And Chen looked at the training bay where Mercer was already setting up the next evolution. "I think she's right." That night, Tank couldn't eat. He sat in the mess hall, pushing food around his plate, replaying every moment of the evaluation. Every failure, every mistake. Every time Mercer had looked at him like she was waiting for something he couldn't deliver. Vega dropped into the seat across from him. You look worse than this morning. Thanks. Chen's different. Vega glanced toward the serving line where Chen stood alone. Whatever she said to him, it messed him up. Messed him up or woke him up? Vega considered this. Maybe both. Tate joined them tray loaded with food he probably wouldn't finish. You guys hear about Team 7. What about them? Washed out. All 4. Mercer failed them after the stress inoculation drill. Tate lowered his voice. One of them called her something during the scenario when he thought she couldn't hear. Tank's blood chilled. What did he call her? Word I'm not going to repeat. Tate shook his head. She didn't react, just made a note. 10 minutes later, all 4 of them were packing their bags. She failed them for one word. She failed them for what the word revealed. Chen had appeared without anyone noticing. That's what she does. She doesn't care about the surface. She cares about what's underneath. Tank stared at his plate. Underneath. That was the problem, wasn't it? Underneath the uniform and the rank and the combat record, Tank Holloway was terrified. Terrified of failing. Terrified of being seen. Terrified that everyone would finally realize he was exactly as small and scared as he felt. And Mercer had seen it. Seen all of it. In one night. In 1 hour. In one spilled drink. 48 hours left, Vega muttered. Think we'll make it. Nobody answered. At 2100, Tank walked to the memorial wall. He didn't know why. Just knew he needed to be somewhere quiet. Somewhere that might help him think. The corridor was empty. Names in black granite stretched the length of the hall, faces frozen in photographs, dates that marked the end of everything. He walked slowly, reading names he didn't recognize. Rangers, Green Berets, SEALs, all of them gone, all of them remembered. He stopped at one photograph without knowing why. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Webb. SEAL Team 6. KIA, Syria, 2022. Marcus. Same name as him. He stared at the photo. Young guy. Confident smile. The kind of face that made you believe everything would turn out fine. He was my swim buddy. Tank spun around. Mercer stood at the end of the corridor. Same uniform, same expression. But something in her posture had shifted. Softened. Bud's class 312, she continued, walking closer. He was 26. I was 19. Everyone thought I'd quit in the first week. He was the only one who didn't. Tank looked at the photo again. What happened to him? Mercer stopped beside him. For a long moment, she just stared at the face of her dead friend. I killed him. Tank's breath caught. Not directly. Her voice was barely above a whisper. But I might as well have. We were in Syria. Compound breach. High-value target. I saw the approach was wrong. Saw the enemy would be expecting us. Recommended a different breach point. She touched the edge of the frame. Senior commander overruled me. Told me to leave tactics to those with experience. Called me sweetheart and said I should focus on communications. Tank felt sick. His plan was exactly what the enemy expected. IED triggered the moment we entered. Marcus was on point. Her jaw tightened. He died instantly. I was too afraid to push back harder, too worried about being dismissed, about being called emotional or hysterical or any of the other words men use when they want women to shut up. She turned to look at Tank. That's why I'm hard on you. Not because of what you did in the bar, because I see the same thing in you that I saw in that commander, the same arrogance, the same certainty that you know better than everyone else. Tank wanted to defend himself, wanted to explain that he wasn't like that he would never, but he couldn't, because she was right. That arrogance killed Marcus Webb, Mercer said. And if I let it slide in you, it will kill someone else. Someone who trusts you. Someone who doesn't deserve to die because you needed to feel important. Tank stared at the photograph. Marcus Webb. 26 years old. Dead because someone couldn't admit they might be wrong. I don't... Tank's voice cracked. I don't want to be that person. Then don't be. Mercer stepped back. You have 48 hours. Show me something different. She walked away. Tank stood alone in the corridor. And for the first time in his life, he didn't want to be the loudest voice in the room. He just wanted to be someone worth listening to. The photograph watched him in silence. Marcus Webb's smile never changed. But Tank Holloway did. Tank didn't sleep again that night. But this time it wasn't fear keeping him awake. It was Marcus Webb's face. That smile. That confidence. That certainty that everything would turn out fine. Dead at 26 because someone couldn't admit they were wrong. At 0430, Tank was already dressed when Chen knocked on his door. You're up early, Chen said. Couldn't sleep. The memorial wall. Tank nodded slowly. She told me about her swim buddy, about how he died. Chen's expression shifted. Something that might have been understanding. She told me too. Different version, same lesson. What did she tell you? That I watched 4 men humiliate a stranger and did nothing because I was afraid of looking weak. Chen's jaw tightened. She asked me how many people I'd let die because of that fear. Tank felt the words hit home. What did you say? Nothing, because there wasn't anything to say. Chen leaned against the doorframe. She's not trying to break us, Holloway. She's trying to show us who we already are. And who are we? Chen looked at him for a long moment. That's the question, isn't it? They walked to the training center together. Vega and Tate joined them halfway, both silent, both carrying the weight of the previous day. Nobody joked, nobody complained. Something had changed. At 0500, Mercer was already on the beach. Full wetsuit, arms crossed, face unreadable. Behind her, the Pacific Ocean stretched black and endless waves crashing against the shore with the kind of indifference that made human concerns feel small. Gentlemen, she said as they approached, welcome to cold water conditioning. Vega looked at the ocean. His face went pale. Full gear, 1 hour minimum. If you fall behind, the ocean doesn't wait. Mercer's voice carried no emotion. Questions. Tank stepped forward. No, ma'am. Then get wet. They hit the water at 0507. The cold was immediate, brutal. The kind of cold that didn't care about rank or reputation or how confident you'd been 24 hours ago. Tank's breath seized in his chest. His muscles screamed. Every instinct told him to turn back. He kept going. Beside him, Vega stumbled, went under, came up gasping. Keep moving, Tank shouted. Don't stop. They pushed deeper, chest high now, waves rolling over their heads every 20 seconds. The weight of their gear dragged at their limbs. Mercer walked the shoreline, watching, silent. At the 15-minute mark, Vega vomited. Seawater and bile erupted from his mouth, but he didn't stop, didn't quit. Just wiped his face and kept pushing forward. Tank felt something shift in his chest. Respect. Real respect. For the first time since they'd formed this team. Vega, he called out. You good? No, Vega shouted back. But I'm not quitting. At 30 minutes, Tate started shaking. His lips were blue. His hands had stopped working. Hypothermia was setting in slow and inevitable. Chen saw it first. He pushed through the waves, grabbed Tate's arm, kept him upright. Stay with me, Chen said. Focus on my voice. Don't think about the cold. I can't feel my... You don't need to feel. You need to move. One step, then another. That's all. Tank watched Chen work. Watched him put aside his own suffering to help a teammate. This was the same man who'd stayed silent in the bar. Who'd watched and done nothing. Not anymore. At 45 minutes, Tank's legs gave out. He went under. Water filled his nose. His lungs burned. For a terrifying moment, he couldn't tell which way was up. Then hands grabbed him, pulled him to the surface. Vega. I got you, Vega gasped. I got you, Sergeant. Tank coughed up seawater, blinked salt from his eyes. Thanks, he managed. Don't mention it. Vega's teeth were chattering. Seriously, never mention it. They pushed on. At the 1-hour mark, Mercer's voice cut across the waves. That's time, get to shore. They staggered out of the water, exhausted, frozen, barely functional. Tank collapsed on the sand. Vega fell beside him. Tate was shaking so badly Chen had to hold him upright. Mercer walked over, looked down at them. Adequate, she said. Tank laughed. He couldn't help it. After everything they'd just survived, adequate was the funniest word he'd ever heard. Mercer's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Catch your breath. We're not done. Before anyone could respond, her radio crackled. Commander Mercer, this is Station Ops. Emergency beacon activated. Fishing vessel taking water 3 miles offshore. 4 crew members. Coast Guard ETA 22 minutes. Vessel integrity estimated at 12. Tank's exhaustion vanished. Mercer keyed her radio. Acknowledged. Closest assets. You are, ma'am. She looked at the 4 Marines. Soaking wet. Hypothermic. Barely standing. Then she made a decision. Holloway. Get your team up. Now. Tank struggled to his feet. Ma'am. Fishing vessel sinking 3 miles out. 4 crew members. Coast Guard won't make it in time. Her voice was steel. We're the only ones who can reach them. Vega made a sound. Ma'am, we're not. We can barely. You're capable if I say you're capable. Mercer cut him off. This is your evaluation. Real world. Real stakes. Real lives. Go or fail. Your call. Tank looked at his team. Vega still pale from vomiting, hands trembling. Tate, hypothermic lips blue, barely conscious. Chen, exhausted shoulders screaming from the cold. None of them were ready. All of them were watching him, waiting for his decision. Tank thought about Marcus Webb, about the commander who'd been too arrogant to listen, about what it cost when leaders put ego above mission. Then he thought about his daughter, 8 years old, believing her father was a hero. We go, he said. Mercer nodded once. Then listen to every word I say and execute exactly as ordered. Understood? Yes, ma'am. They went. The support boat cut through the waves at maximum speed. Tank could see the fishing vessel now listing badly, smoke rising from somewhere below deck. 4 figures clung to the railing. Mercer's voice came through the radio, calm, controlled. Holloway, you lead the approach. Chen, you're on medical. Tate, help him. Vega communications with Coast Guard. Copy, they responded in unison. The vessel's taking water fast. You'll have maybe 5 minutes once you board. Get the crew off. Don't be heroes. If it starts going down, you get out. Tank gripped the railing. Understood. They reached the fishing vessel at 0623. It was worse than he'd thought. The boat was listing at 30 degrees water pouring through a breach in the hull. The crew, 3 men and a woman, were clustered on the high side, screaming in Spanish. Go, Mercer shouted. Tank jumped first. He hit the deck hard, nearly slipped on the wet surface, caught himself. Vega landed beside him. Chen and Tate followed. Vega, get on comms. Chen, assess the injured. One of the fishermen was bleeding badly. Head wound. Chen was on him, immediately, hands moving with the kind of precision that surprised Tank. Laceration above the right eye, not arterial. He'll live. Tate helped the others to the support boat. Tate moved, grabbed the woman. She couldn't have been more than 50, but terror made her fight him. Easy, Tate said. We're here to help Navy. We're Navy. She stopped struggling. Let him guide her to the edge. The boat groaned, metal screaming against water. The list increased to 40 degrees. We're running out of time, Vega shouted. Coast Guard's still 15 out. Tank looked at the crew. 2 evacuated. 2 remaining. The wounded man and an older fisherman who'd frozen in place, unable to move. Chen, get the wounded man out. He can't walk, his leg might be broken. Tank made a decision. Carry him. Holloway, I can't. Carry him, or he dies. Move! Chen lifted the man in a fireman's carry, staggered toward the edge. Tate grabbed the other side. Together, they got him to the support boat. 1 left. The old fisherman stood frozen against the railing, eyes wide, mouth moving in silent prayer. Sir, Tank shouted. Sir, you need to move. Now. The man didn't respond. The boat lurched. 50 degrees now. They had seconds. Tank ran. He reached the old man, grabbed his arm. "I'm not leaving you here. Move your feet." The fisherman's eyes focused on Tank's face. Something broke through the terror. "Gracias," he whispered. "Gracias. Thank me later. Go." They half ran, half slid across the tilting deck. Tank could feel the boat dying beneath them, could feel the moment coming when gravity would win. "Jump," Mercer's voice cut through the chaos. "Now." Tank shoved the fisherman toward the edge. The man hit the water. Vega was there pulling him toward the support boat. The fishing vessel rolled. Tank jumped. For a moment he was weightless. The sky wheeled above him. The water rushed up. Then impact. Cold. Darkness. He clawed toward the surface. Lungs burning. Limbs screaming. His head broke the water just as the fishing vessel capsized completely, hull rising like the belly of a dying whale. "Holloway." Chen's voice. Somewhere to his left. Tank swam. 3 strokes. 4. Hands grabbed his vest, hauled him toward the support boat. He collapsed on the deck, gasping. Mercer stood over him. "All crew recovered," she said. "Vessel lost." Tank looked at his team. Vega still on comms coordinating with Coast Guard. Chen stabilizing the wounded fisherman. Tate wrapping thermal blankets around the survivors. "We did it," Tank breathed. "Yes." Mercer's voice was quiet. "You did." The Coast Guard arrived at 0641. Their petty officer surveyed the scene. 4 survivors, 4 rescuers, 1 sunken vessel. "Who led this operation?" he asked. Mercer looked at Tank, at Vega, at Chen and Tate. "They did," she said. "I observed." Tank met her eyes. For the first time since the bar, he saw something other than assessment. He saw respect. Back at base, the medical bay was quiet. Tank sat wrapped in thermal blankets, a gash above his eye from a piece of debris. Chen's hands were bandaged from rope burn. Tate was on a saline drip. Vega looked like he'd aged 5 years. Mercer walked in, still in her wetsuit, hair tied back, face calm. "Why did you trust us?" Tank asked. His voice was raw, different. Mercer pulled up a chair, sat across from him. "I didn't," she said. "Then why?" "I trusted myself to pull you out if you failed." She met his eyes. "But you didn't fail." Vega looked up from his bandaged hands. "That's the first time anyone's believed we could do something like that." "Belief isn't free," Mercer replied. "You earned it today." Silence settled over the room. Then, Tank asked the question he'd been holding since the memorial wall. How do you stay that calm, even when everything's falling apart? Mercer was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was different, softer. "I'll tell you a story. All of you. Off the record." She stood, walked to the window, looked out at the base at the ocean beyond. 3 years ago, I was exactly where you are now. Angry, scared, trying to prove I deserved to be here. I'd just lost my swim buddy. Just watched him die because I was too afraid to speak up. She turned to face them. I wanted to quit. Every day for 6 months I wanted to quit. The only thing that stopped me was a promise I made standing over his grave. "What promise?" Chen asked quietly. "That I would never let fear silence me again. That I would speak up even when it was hard. Even when people didn't want to hear it." Her jaw tightened. "And that when I found people worth investing in, people who could be great if someone just believed in them, I wouldn't give up. No matter how many reasons they gave me." Tank felt the words hit home. "You think we're worth it?" Vega asked. "After everything we did," Mercer looked at each of them in turn. "What you did in that bar was ugly, cruel, the kind of behavior that tells me exactly who you've been." She paused. "But what you did today in the ocean, on that boat pulling those people to safety, when your bodies were screaming at you to quit, that tells me who you could become." She walked to the door. "The evaluation isn't over. You have 24 hours left. Don't waste them. Tank watched her go. Then he looked at his team. Vega, Chen, Tate. 3 men he'd dismissed as burdens. 3 men who'd just saved 4 lives beside him. We need to talk, Tank said quietly. Chen nodded. About the bar. About everything. Tank pulled the blanket tighter. About who we've been. About who we want to be. About what happens if we actually pass this thing. Tate spoke for the first time in hours. You think we can pass? Tank thought about Mercer. About Marcus Webb. About his daughter waiting at home believing her father was a hero. Yeah, he said slowly. I think we can. But not as the men who walked into that bar 3 days ago. Then who? Vega asked. Tank didn't have an answer. But for the first time in his life, he wanted to find one. At 2100, Mercer called them to the memorial wall. She stood in front of Marcus Webb's photograph waiting. Tomorrow is the final evolution, she said as they approached. Compound assault, live fire, high-value target extraction. Tank nodded. We're ready. No. She turned to face them. You're not, but you're closer than you were. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. A trident pin, old, scratched, the gold worn to brass. This belonged to Marcus Webb. He gave it to me the day I earned my own. Told me to pass it forward when I found people worth the investment. She held it up, letting the light catch the worn metal. I'm not giving this to you. Not yet. You haven't earned it. She met Tank's eyes. But I want you to know it exists. I want you to know what you're fighting for tomorrow. What are we fighting for? Chen asked. Mercer looked at the wall, at all the names, all the faces. The chance to become something better than you were. She walked away without another word. Tank stood in front of Marcus Webb's photograph for a long time, 26 years old, dead because someone couldn't listen. I won't be that person, he whispered. I promise. The photograph didn't answer, but somewhere deep inside, Tank felt something shift. Something that had been broken for a very long time. Something that was finally starting to heal. The final evolution began at 0400. Tank hadn't slept. None of them had. But this time it wasn't fear keeping them awake. It was focus, preparation. The knowledge that everything they'd survived in the last 70 hours had led to this moment. The compound mock-up loomed in the darkness. 2 stories, 12 rooms, hidden corners, simulated IEDs, live fire authorized with training rounds. Mercer stood at the briefing point, tablet in hand. High-value target extraction, she said. 12 hostiles, 4 hostages. 45-minute window before enemy reinforcements arrive. Tank nodded. Standard scenario. They'd run variations 100 times. Then Mercer added the complication. New intelligence. She looked at each of them. One of the 4 hostages is an enemy agent. Deep cover. Bad intel on which one. The air changed. You have to decide, Mercer continued. Extract all 4 and risk the agent escaping with classified information. Or leave one behind and risk abandoning an innocent civilian. Vega's face went pale. Ma'am, that's reality. Mercer cut him off. Every operation has incomplete information. Every decision has consequences. The question is whether you can make the hard call when lives depend on it. Tank felt the weight settle on his shoulders. 30 seconds to decision point, Mercer said. Clock starts now. Tank closed his eyes. 3 days ago, he would have charged in, made the loudest call, demanded everyone follow his lead. But 3 days ago, he'd been a different man. He opened his eyes and looked at his team. Options, he said quietly. Chen spoke first. We extract 3. Detain the 4th separately. I can analyze micro-expressions during initial contact. Stress patterns that don't match the situation. Risky, Vega said. What if you're wrong? Then we adjust. But it's better than leaving an innocent behind or letting an agent walk. Tate nodded slowly. I can handle medical for confirmed hostages. Keep them separated during triage. Tank looked at Mercer. Her face revealed nothing. We extract 3, he said. Detain the 4th. Chen on behavioral analysis. Vega on comms intercept. If the agent has a phone, you find the signal. Tate on medical. I lead breach and provide cover. Mercer's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Execute, she said. They moved. Tank had never felt this focused. Every step was deliberate, every breath controlled. The compound swallowed them in darkness. Contact, Chen whispered. 2 hostiles, 9 o'clock. Vega suppression, Tate cover R6. They engaged. Training rounds cracked through the air. 2 targets down. Moving, Tank called. Chen, you're on point. They cleared the first floor in under 4 minutes. 3 hostiles neutralized. No casualties. Stairs, Chen said. 2 more tangos at the top. Tank made the call. Flash and clear. On my mark. The flashbang detonated. They surged upward. 2 more down. Hostages located, Vega reported. Room 12, 4 individuals, 2 guards. Tank's heart pounded. This was it. Chen, you ready? Ready. Vega comms sweep on my signal. Tate prep for extraction. They stacked on the door. Tank counted down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. Breach. The room erupted. Training rounds everywhere. Tank dropped the first guard. Vega took the second. Clear, Chen shouted. 4 hostages huddled against the far wall. 3 men, 1 woman. All terrified. All watching them with wide eyes. Chen moved in face calm, eyes scanning. Tank watched him work. Watched how he approached each hostage. How he asked simple questions. How he noted the responses. First one's clean, Chen said. Genuine fear response. Second one too. He moved to the third, paused. Something wrong, Tank asked. Chen didn't answer immediately. He was staring at the third hostage. A man in his 40s, well-dressed, calm, too calm. His stress patterns don't match, Chen said quietly. Everyone else is hyperventilating. He's controlling his breathing. Vega looked up from his equipment. I'm getting a phone signal, encrypted. It's coming from him. The man's expression changed. Something cold flickered behind his eyes. Detain him, Tank ordered. Separate from the others. They moved fast. Zip ties on the suspect. Tate began medical assessment on the remaining hostages. Clock check, Tank said. 12 minutes remaining, Vega reported. Let's move. They extracted. Chen had the suspected agent. Tank led the genuine hostages. Vega covered their rear. Tate provided support. They reached the extraction point with 3 minutes to spare. Mercer was waiting. Hostages secured, Tank reported. 1 detained as suspected enemy agent. Chen identified through behavioral analysis. Vega confirmed via comms intercept. Mercer looked at the detained man, then at Chen. Correct identification, she said. The agent was planted to test your decision-making under pressure. Tank exhaled. You passed. Mercer's voice was quiet. All 4 of you. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Vega let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Tate's shoulders dropped. Chen simply nodded, but his eyes were bright. Tank stood still. 3 days ago, he'd thrown a drink at a girl in a bar. Now he was standing here having just led his team through the most intense evaluation of their careers. Sergeant Holloway. Mercer stepped closer. A word. The others looked at him. He nodded for them to go ahead. When they were alone, Mercer spoke. You made every call correctly. You listened to your team. You trusted their expertise over your ego. She paused. That's not the same man who walked into the Iron Anchor 3 nights ago. No, ma'am. Tank's voice was rough. It's not. What changed? He thought about the question. About Marcus Webb's photograph. About his daughter. About the fisherman he'd carried off a sinking boat. I stopped trying to prove I was strong, he said finally, and started trying to actually be strong. Mercer studied him for a long moment. That's the hardest lesson there is, she said. Most people never learn it. I almost didn't. But you did. She reached into her pocket. which is why I'm recommending all 4 of you for permanent assignment to JSOTF-7. Tank's breath caught. You've earned it, Mercer continued. Not because you're the best operators I've ever evaluated. You're not. But because you showed me you can grow. You can change. You can become better than you were. She pulled out a small box. Inside 4 integration badges. These are yours, effective immediately. Tank stared at the badges, the same ones Master Chief Delgado had worn, the same ones that marked you as qualified to operate with any unit, any mission, any stakes. Ma'am, he managed. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Mercer closed the box. Prove it was the right call. She turned to leave. Commander? She paused. Thank you, Tank said, for not giving up on us. Mercer looked back at him. For the first time since they'd met, she almost smiled. Thank me by being better, by leading better, by remembering what it felt like to be underestimated. She held his gaze. And when you find someone worth investing in, someone everyone else has given up on, don't quit on them, no matter how many reasons they give you. I won't. I know. She walked away. That's why I chose you. The celebration that night was quiet. No shouting, no bravado. Just 4 men sitting in the common area holding badges they'd almost lost the right to earn. I still can't believe it, Vega said softly. 3 days ago, we were throwing drinks at her. 3 days ago, we were different people, Chen replied. Tate turned his badge over in his hands. You think she knew from the beginning? Knew what? Tank asked. That we could change, that there was something worth saving. Tank thought about the bar, about the look in Mercer's eyes when the whiskey hit her table. That calm, that assessment. Yeah, he said. I think she knew, or hoped, or decided to find out. Why? Vega asked. Why take the risk on us? Because someone took the risk on her. Tank looked at his badge, and she made a promise to pass it forward. Silence settled over the room, then Chen spoke. So what now? Now we earn it, Tank said. Every day, every mission. We prove she was right to believe in us. And if we screw up, then we learn and do better. Tank met Chen's eyes. That's what she taught us. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep getting better. At 2100, Admiral Keller arrived at the training center. Tank had never seen a 3-star admiral up close. The man was 59 gray at the temples, with the kind of presence that made everyone straighten without being told. Mercer met him at the entrance. Commander, Keller said, your evaluation report. Submitted this morning, sir? I read it. Keller's eyes swept over the 4 Marines standing at attention. You recommended all 4 for integration, despite the incident at the bar. Because of it, sir. Mercer's voice was steady. They showed me who they were at their worst. Then they showed me who they could become at their best. That's what I evaluate. Keller nodded slowly. You're sure about this? Positive, sir. The Admiral turned to Tank. Sergeant Holloway, Commander Mercer tells me you led the rescue of 4 civilians yesterday. My team did, sir. She also tells me you were the one who threw whiskey on her uniform 3 nights ago. Tank's stomach dropped. Yes, sir. Care to explain how those 2 things fit together? Tank swallowed. No excuse, sir. I was arrogant, stupid. I judged Commander Mercer based on what I saw instead of who she was. I was wrong. And now I know that the smallest person in any room might be the most dangerous, and the quietest voice might be the one worth listening to most. Keller studied him for a long moment. That's a hard lesson, Sergeant. Most men never learn it. Commander Mercer taught me, sir. By example. Keller glanced at Mercer. Something passed between them. Respect. Understanding. Very well. Keller turned back to the group. You're assigned to JSOTF-7 effective immediately. Report to admin for processing. He started to leave, then paused. One more thing. His voice hardened. We have a situation. Intel from Syria. American aid worker captured by ISIS splinter cell. 48-hour window before execution video. Tank's blood went cold. Requires immediate insertion team. Keller looked at Mercer. Commander, I'm authorizing you to lead. Select your team. Mercer didn't hesitate. Holloway, Vega, Chen, Tate. Tank blinked. Ma'am, you heard me. She turned to face them. You wanted to prove you earned those badges. Here's your chance. Vega looked like he might pass out. Tate's hands were shaking. Chen stood perfectly still, but his jaw was tight. Tank stepped forward. When do we leave? 4 hours. Mercer met his eyes. Get your gear. Get your heads right. This isn't training anymore. Understood. She turned to follow Keller, then looked back. Holloway, one more thing. Yes, ma'am. Don't make me regret this. 4 hours later, they were wheels up over the Atlantic. The Blackhawk's rotors thrummed through Tank's bones. Beside him, Vega checked and rechecked his communications equipment. Across the cabin, Chen studied satellite imagery while Tate inventoried medical supplies. Mercer sat apart reviewing the mission brief on her tablet. Tank watched her work. 3 days ago, she'd have been a college girl in a hoodie. Now, she was leading them into combat. You're staring, Mercer said without looking up. Sorry, ma'am. Don't be sorry, ask. Tank hesitated. Why us for a real mission? You could have any team. Mercer set down her tablet. Because you know what it feels like to be underestimated. You understand why appearances lie. And you've learned that the mission matters more than ego. That's enough. That's everything. She met his eyes. The operators who fail in the field aren't usually the ones lacking skills. They're the ones who can't adapt, can't listen, can't admit when they're wrong. She paused. You've proven you can do all three. In 72 hours. In 72 hours, you became different men. That's rare. She picked up her tablet again. Don't waste it. The insertion point was 12 clicks from the target compound. They hit the ground at 0200 local time. Desert terrain. No moon. Perfect conditions for what came next. Comms check, Mercer said quietly. Vega online. Chen online. Tate online. Holloway online. Good. Mercer's voice came through the earpiece. We move in formation. I lead. Holloway on my 6. Chen and Tate on flanks. Vega handles communications and coordinates extraction. Copy. They responded in unison. They moved. Tank had trained for this 1,000 times. Night movement, hostile territory, high-value target. But training was one thing. Reality was another. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every sound could be an ambush. Every step could trigger an IED. At the 6-click mark, Mercer raised her fist. Everyone froze. Contact, she whispered. Patrol. 200 meters. 4 tangos. Tank's heart pounded. Orders. Hold position. Let them pass. They waited. Seconds stretched into minutes. Tank could hear his own breathing, could hear his pulse in his ears. The patrol moved past without seeing them. Clear, Mercer said. Move. They reached the compound perimeter at Yo 315. Intel had said 12 hostiles. Through his night vision, Tank counted at least 20. We've got a problem, he murmured. I see it. Mercer's voice was tight. Intel was wrong. They doubled security. Abort, Vega asked. Negative. The hostage doesn't have time. Mercer was silent for a moment. We adapt. She laid out a new plan. Quick. Efficient. Tank listened, asked one clarifying question, then nodded. Understood. On my mark. Mercer counted down. 3, 2, 1. Execute. They hit the compound from 3 angles. Tank breached the eastern wall with Chen. Mercer took the south with Tate. Vega provided overwatch and comms from the perimeter. The first guard never saw Tank coming, neither did the second. East wing clear, he reported, moving to holding area. South wing clear, Mercer replied, converging on your position. They met at the central corridor, 4 hostiles down, 16 to go. Hostage should be in the basement, Chen said. Intel showed underground holding cells. Lead the way, Mercer ordered. They descended. The basement was worse than Tank expected. Dark, cramped, the smell of fear and unwashed bodies. And at the end of the corridor behind a rusted metal door, they found her. Sarah Chen, American aid worker. 34 years old, kidnapped 6 days ago. She looked up when the door opened, eyes wide, face bruised, but alive. U.S. Navy, Mercer said. We're here to take you home. Sarah started crying. Can you walk? Tank asked. I think so. Then let's move. He helped her to her feet. Stay close. Do exactly what we say. They started back up. That's when everything went wrong. The alarm triggered at 0332. Tank didn't know what set it off. Didn't matter. What mattered was the sound of boots, voices, weapons being charged. Contact, Chen shouted. Multiple tangos, main corridor. Mercer's voice cut through the chaos. Fighting withdrawal, Holloway, take point. Get the hostage out. Tank grabbed Sarah's arm. Stay behind me, don't stop moving. They ran. Gunfire erupted behind them. Tank could hear Chen returning fire, could hear Tate calling out positions, could hear Mercer's voice calm even now directing their retreat. Vega, Tank shouted into his comms. We need extraction now. Already called helicopters 4 minutes out. We don't have 4 minutes. They burst through the eastern exit. The perimeter was chaos, more hostiles converging from all directions. Tank made a decision. Everyone to the extraction point, I'll cover. Negative. Mercer's voice was sharp. We stay together. There's no time. Tank pushed Sarah toward Chen. Get her out. That's an order. You don't give me orders, Sergeant. Then consider it a request. He met her eyes through the darkness. You taught me that leadership means getting your people home. Let me do that. Something passed across Mercer's face. Something that looked almost like pride. 3 minutes, she said. Then we come back for you. Just get her out. They ran. Tank turned to face the compound. 8 hostiles converging on his position. 1 magazine. Maybe 30 seconds of cover. He thought about his daughter. Thought about the man he'd been 3 days ago. Thought about who he wanted to be when this was over. Then he opened fire. The helicopter touched down at 0338. Chen loaded Sarah aboard. Tate followed. Vega was already on comms with base reporting successful extraction. Mercer stood at the door scanning the darkness. Where is he? She demanded. No answer from Tank's radio. Holloway reports static. Mercer's jaw tightened. I'm going back. Commander, the extraction window. I don't leave people behind. She jumped from the helicopter. Cover me. She ran into the darkness and found him 300 meters from the perimeter. Tank was down, bleeding from his shoulder, 2 dead hostiles beside him. He'd held the line until his magazine was empty. Holloway. Mercer dropped beside him. Can you move? Thought I told you to leave. His voice was weak, fading. And I told you I don't leave people behind. She pulled his arm over her shoulder. Now move your ass, Sergeant. That's an order. They ran. Bullets kicked up dirt around them. Tank's legs barely functioned. Mercer half carried him, her small frame somehow supporting his weight. Why? He gasped. Why come back? Because you came back for me first. They reached the helicopter as the first RPG streaked past. Chen grabbed Tank, hauled him aboard. Tate was on him immediately, applying pressure to the wound. Mercer jumped in last. Go! She shouted. Go, go, go! The Black Hawk lifted off as the compound erupted in fire below them. Tank lay on the deck, staring at the ceiling, Tate's hands keeping him alive. Mercer knelt beside him. You disobeyed my order, she said. Yes, ma'am. You could have been killed. Yes, ma'am. You held that position alone against 8 hostiles with 1 magazine. Tank coughed, blood on his lips. You taught me that leadership means sacrifice. Couldn't let them reach Sarah. Mercer was quiet for a long moment. Then softly, Marcus Webb would have liked you. Tank's vision was blurring. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. Don't get used to it. But she was almost smiling. You're still an idiot. Yes, ma'am. His eyes closed. But I'm your idiot now. He passed out before she could respond. The last thing he heard was her voice, quiet in the darkness. Yeah, you are. Tank woke up in a hospital bed. White ceiling. Steady beeping. the smell of antiseptic and clean sheets. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. Didn't know if he was alive or dead. Then the pain hit. His shoulder screamed. His ribs ached. Every breath felt like swallowing broken glass. Easy. Chen's voice came from somewhere to his left. You lost a lot of blood. Tank turned his head. Chen sat in a chair beside the bed, dark circles under his eyes. Uniform wrinkled like he'd been there all night. How long? Tank managed. 18 hours. Surgery went well. Bullet missed everything important. Sarah. Safe. Debriefing with intelligence. She's going home tomorrow. Chen leaned forward. You saved her life, Holloway. Held that position long enough for us to extract. Tank closed his eyes. Mercer came back for me. Yeah. Chen's voice was quiet. She did. Told her to leave. Since when does Commander Mercer take orders from sergeants? Tank almost laughed. It hurt too much. The door opened. Vega walked in, followed by Tate. Both looked exhausted. Both looked relieved. He's awake, Vega said. Thank God. I was getting tired of Chen's bedside manner. My bedside manner is fine. You've been staring at him like he might explode for 18 hours. That's not fine. That's creepy. Tate moved to the foot of the bed. How are you feeling, Sergeant? Like I got shot. That's because you got shot. Tank tried to sit up. Bad idea. Pain lanced through his shoulder, and he fell back, gasping. Don't move, Chen said. Doctor's orders. You've got another week of recovery minimum. A week? Tank shook his head. I can't. You can and you will. A new voice. Female. Familiar. Mercer stood in the doorway. She looked different out of combat gear. Civilian clothes. Hair down. Almost normal except for the way she carried herself. That quiet authority that never left. Commander, Tank said. Sergeant. She walked to his bedside. You look terrible. Feel worse. Good. Maybe next time you'll think twice before disobeying a direct order. Tank met her eyes. Would you have left me? No. Then we're even. Something flickered across her face. Almost a smile. The hostage is secure, Mercer said. Intelligence estimates her information will prevent at least 2 planned attacks. Admiral Keller is pleased. And us? Vega asked. Mercer looked at each of them in turn. Chen, Vega, Tate, Tank. Permanent assignment to JSOTF-7. Effective immediately. She paused. Congratulations, you're officially part of the team. Nobody cheered. Nobody celebrated. They just stood there letting the weight of it settle. There's one more thing. Mercer reached into her pocket. Admiral Keller wanted me to give you these personally. She pulled out 4 small boxes. Tank's heart stopped. Integration badges, Mercer said. For extraordinary performance under combat conditions, you've earned them. She handed them out, 1 to Chen, 1 to Vega, 1 to Tate. Then she stopped at Tank's bedside. This one's different. She opened the box. Inside wasn't just an integration badge, it was a bronze star. For holding position against superior forces to ensure civilian extraction, Mercer said quietly. For putting the mission above personal safety. For demonstrating the kind of leadership that gets people home. Tank stared at the medal. Couldn't speak. Marcus Webb earned one of these in Afghanistan, Mercer continued. For the same reason. He held a position alone so his team could extract wounded civilians. Her voice tightened. He didn't make it. You did. She placed the box in his hands. Don't waste it. Tank looked at the medal, then at Mercer. I won't, he said. I promise. 2 weeks later, Tank stood in front of a different door. Not a hospital. Not a training center. His ex-wife's house. His daughter was inside. 8 years old. Hadn't seen him in 4 months. His hand shook as he raised it to knock. The door opened before he could. Emma stood there. Small. Dark hair like her mother. Eyes like his. Daddy. Tank dropped to one knee. Pain shot through his shoulder. He ignored it. "Hey, baby girl." She launched herself at him, arms around his neck, face buried in his chest. "Mommy said you were hurt. Mommy said you might not come home." "I'm here." Tank held her tight, tighter than he'd ever held anything. "I'm here, Emma. I'm not going anywhere." His ex-wife appeared in the doorway, Rebecca, still beautiful, still angry, but something in her eyes had shifted. "She watched the news," Rebecca said quietly. "Saw the report about the rescue. She knows it was you." "It wasn't just me. It was my team." "That's not what Commander Mercer told the reporters." Tank looked up. "Mercer talked to reporters. Off the record, but someone leaked it. The story about how a sergeant held position alone against 8 hostiles so a civilian could escape." Rebecca's voice softened. "She said you were the bravest man she'd ever served with." Tank didn't know what to say. Emma pulled back, looking at his shoulder. "Does it hurt?" "A little." "Mommy said you got shot saving someone." "Yeah, baby, I did." "Are you a hero now?" Tank thought about the question, about everything he'd done, everything he'd been. "I'm trying to be," he said honestly. "I'm trying really hard." Emma hugged him again. And for the first time in years, Tank Holloway felt like he might actually deserve it. 3 months later, the iron anchor looked exactly the same. Same dim lights, same broken jukebox, same old bartender wiping the same stretch of bar. Tank walked in with Chen Vega and Tate. Not loud this time, respectful. They nodded to Ray at the bar. Ray nodded back. Then they saw her. Corner booth. Back to the wall. Ginger ale and cheese fries. Mercer looked up as they approached. "Commander," Tank said. "Mind if we join you?" She gestured to the empty chairs. "Operational or social?" "Social, ma'am, if that's allowed." "Sit." They did. Ordered drinks. Tank got water. Mercer noticed. Didn't comment. For a few minutes they just sat. Comfortable silence. The kind that comes after shared experience. After blood and fire and the kind of fear that either breaks you or binds you together forever. Then Vega spoke. "Ma'am, I need to ask. Why didn't you destroy us after that first night you had every right?" Mercer set down her glass. "Because destroying people is easy. Building them is command." "You could have had us discharged," Tate said. "I could have, but then I would have failed again." Chen understood. "Marcus Webb." Mercer nodded. "I let someone silence me once. It cost a good man his life. You 4 taught me that command isn't about being louder. It's about being certain enough that volume doesn't matter." Tank leaned forward. "We looked him up. Read the after-action report. That wasn't your fault, ma'am. I let myself be dismissed because I was afraid of being wrong." Mercer's jaw tightened. "That was my fault. Leadership isn't about never being afraid. It's about speaking up anyway. You learn that or you don't. I learned it too late for Marcus, but maybe just in time for you." The door opened behind them. An older man walked in, gray hair, weathered face, the kind of presence that made the whole room shift. Ray straightened behind the bar. "Master Chief?" Bill Hargrove nodded at Ray, then his eyes found Mercer. "Commander?" "Master Chief?" Mercer stood. "Didn't expect to see you here. Heard you had a successful operation. Wanted to congratulate you personally." Hargrove's gaze swept over the 4 Marines. "These the ones from the bar?" "Yes, sir." Hargrove studied them. Tank felt like he was being X-rayed. "You boys have any idea what kind of officer is standing in front of you?" Tank straightened. "We're starting to understand, sir." Hargrove stepped closer to the table. "I've trained SEALs for 30 years, seen hundreds of operators come through. Commander Mercer is the only one who made me reconsider everything I thought I knew about who belongs in special operations." He looked at Mercer, not because she was good for a woman, because she was better than most men. Mercer's expression didn't change, but something softened around her eyes. Hargrove reached into his jacket, pulled out something small, a trident pin, old, scratched, the gold worn to brass. "This went through Desert Storm with me, brought me home from places I shouldn't have survived. He held it out to Mercer. "Marcus Webb would want you to have it, for the ones who come next." Mercer took the pin, held it like it was made of glass. "Thank you, Master Chief." "Don't thank me. Pass it forward." Hargrove looked at Tank. "That's what she does, you know. Finds people worth saving, invests in them, makes them better than they were." He turned and walked out without another word. The bar was quiet after he left. Mercer looked at the pin in her hand, then at Tank. "He gave me one of these 15 years ago," she said quietly, "after I failed pool comp for the 3rd time but kept trying. Said it was tradition. Pass it forward when you find people worth the investment." She reached into her pocket, pulled out 4 more pins, not tridents. Those were for SEALs. These were different, older, personal. "I had these made after Syria," Mercer said. "One for each member of my team who didn't come home. Marcus Webb, Sarah Torres, James Okonkwo, David Park." She laid them on the table. "They believed in me when no one else did. They died because I was too afraid to speak up." She pushed the pins toward Tank. "I'm not giving you their memory. That's mine. But I'm giving you the lesson they taught me, that leadership isn't about being the loudest voice. It's about being the last one standing when the loud ones fade." Tank picked up one of the pins, small, simple. A single star with 4 points. "What do we do with these?" Vega asked. "You remember," Mercer's voice was firm. "Every time you want to dismiss someone because they're young or small or different. Every time you think you know better than everyone else. Every time your ego tells you to stop listening." She paused. "You look at that pin and you remember what it cost when someone didn't." Tank closed his fist around the metal. "We won't forget," he said. "I promise." 6 months later, the iron anchor was full. New faces, new uniforms, new candidates waiting for integration evaluation. Tank sat at the bar with Chen, off-duty, civilian clothes, watching the room. A group of young Marines entered, loud, cocky, the kind of confidence that came from never being truly tested. One of them gestured too wide, telling a story. His elbow caught a glass. Beer splashed across a corner table. Tank froze. A woman sat alone in the corner booth, small, young, oversized hoodie, ponytail, drinking ginger ale. She didn't react to the spill, just reached for a napkin and began cleaning up. The Marines laughed. "Nice shot," one of them called out. 10 points. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "Cat got your tongue." Tank's hand tightened on his glass. Chen touched his arm. "Don't. They're doing exactly what we did." "I know." Chen's voice was quiet. "But it's not our place to interfere." Tank watched the woman move to a different table, back to the wall, eyes tracking the room. She was new. Not Mercer. Different evaluator. Same methodology. "Should we warn them?" Tank asked quietly. Chen watched the woman calmly reorganize her new table, watched her pull out a tablet and begin making notes. "No," he almost smiled. "Let them learn. That's the only way it sticks." Tank nodded slowly. The young Marines kept laughing, kept joking, kept having no idea that their entire careers were being evaluated by the woman they'd just humiliated. Tomorrow they would walk into a briefing room and see her standing at the front. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, they were still the men they'd always been. And Tank Holloway understood now that was exactly the point. At 2100, Tank drove to the memorial wall. He'd been coming here every week since Syria, standing in front of Marcus Webb's photograph, talking to a dead man who couldn't answer. But tonight, he wasn't alone. Mercer stood in front of the wall, hands clasped behind her back. She didn't turn when he approached. "New class tomorrow," she said quietly. "I know. Saw some of them at the bar. They spilled beer on my replacement." "I noticed." Tank stood beside her. She handled it well. She learned from the best. They stood in silence looking at the names, all the faces, all the dates. 3 years, Mercer said finally. 3 years since I lost him. 3 years since I promised I'd do better. Have you? She was quiet for a long moment. I think so. She looked at Tank. You're my proof. Me. You walked into that bar as the worst version of yourself. Cruel, arrogant. Everything I hated about the man who got Marcus killed. She paused. Now look at you. Bronze Star, Combat Leadership Commendation, training the next generation of operators. You did that, Tank said. Not me. I gave you the chance. You did the work. Mercer turned to face Marcus Webb's photograph. That's what he would have wanted. Not revenge, not punishment. Growth. Tank reached into his pocket, pulled out the pin she'd given him 6 months ago. I carry this everywhere, he said. Every briefing, every mission, every time I want to dismiss someone because they don't look the part. Does it help? It reminds me. He held up the pin. Reminds me who I was, who I don't want to be again. Mercer nodded slowly. My daughter asked me about you, Tank continued. Asked who Commander Mercer was, why Daddy talks about her so much. What did you tell her? The truth. Tank met her eyes. That you're the person who showed me what real strength looks like. That you gave me a second chance when I deserved nothing. That because of you, I might actually become the father she deserves. Mercer's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. Something that might have been tears. Marcus said something to me once, she said quietly. The night before he died. He said that leadership isn't about never making mistakes. It's about learning from them fast enough that other people don't pay the price. He was right. He usually was. She touched the frame of his photograph. I miss him every day. I know. They stood in silence. Then Mercer spoke again. I'm being promoted, Captain. New command. Tank's heart clenched. You're leaving. Not leaving. Expanding. She turned to face him. I'm starting a new program. Training evaluators. Teaching them my methodology. Quiet assessment. Second chances. Building people instead of breaking them. That's incredible. I want you to be part of it. Tank blinked. Me. You know what it feels like to be on both sides. To be the one making mistakes and the one learning from them. That perspective is invaluable. She held his gaze. I'm asking you to help me train the next generation, to pass forward what I taught you. Tank looked at Marcus Webb's photograph, 26 years old, dead because someone couldn't listen. Then he looked at Mercer, 24 years old, alive because she'd learned to speak up. Yes, he said. I'm in. Mercer nodded once. Good. We start next month. She started to walk away, then paused. One more thing, Holloway. Yes, ma'am. Stop calling me ma'am. Something that might have been a smile crossed her face. We're partners now. Cassidy is fine. Tank stared at her. In 3 years of knowing her, he'd never once heard her first name spoken casually. Cassidy, he repeated. Don't wear it out. She walked away. See you next month, Marcus. Tank froze. She'd called him Marcus, his first name. Not Holloway, not Sergeant, not any of the titles that kept distance between them. Marcus, like they were equals, like they were friends. He stood alone in front of the memorial wall, holding the pin she'd given him, watching her disappear down the corridor. And for the first time since that night at the Iron Anchor tank, Holloway didn't feel like he was trying to become someone better. He felt like he already was. 1 year later, a new class of candidates filed into the briefing room. 12 Marines. Young, confident, ready to prove themselves. At the front of the room, a man stood waiting. Mid-30s, scarred shoulder, wedding ring on his left hand. Beside him, a woman, small, young, the kind of face that made people underestimate her. Welcome to JSOTF 7 Integration Evaluation, Tank said. I'm Staff Sergeant Marcus Holloway. This is Captain Cassidy Mercer. We'll be your evaluation commanders for the next 72 hours. The candidates straightened. Some of you may be wondering about our methodology, Mercer continued. We don't evaluate based on how fast you can run or how much you can lift. We evaluate based on how you think, how you lead, how you treat people when you believe no one is watching. She let the words settle. The evaluation has already begun. For some of you, it began last night. In the third row, 3 young Marines went pale. Tank almost smiled. The cycle continued. And somewhere in a memorial corridor on the other side of the base, Marcus Webb's photograph watched over them all. Below it, a small brass plate had been added. For teaching us that leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the last one standing when the loud ones fade. For showing us that second chances aren't given, they're earned. And for proving that sometimes the most dangerous person in any room is the one who lets you keep talking long enough to reveal exactly who you are. The tradition continued. One spilled drink at a time. One second chance at a time. One life saved at a time. Because that's what real leaders do. They don't destroy. They build. And the ones they build go on to build others, until the chain stretches so far and so strong that no single link can break it. Tank Holloway had learned that lesson in 72 hours. He would spend the rest of his life passing it forward. And somewhere watching over them all, Marcus Webb finally rested. His legacy was safe. His sacrifice had meaning. And the girl they'd called college student had become the commander who changed everything. Not with volume, not with force, with patience, with wisdom, with the quiet certainty that people could become better than they were. That was the real victory. That was the real strength. And that was how legends were truly made.